Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of Take a Look Live. Yes, I said episode 10. It's a big moment.
This is our 10th episode.
It's our 10th episode. Well, this is your 9th episode.
You're right.
To be honest.
You're right.
Scott Stevens was here for one. We also lost episode 6, unfortunately, due to some technical issues. But I am Kyle Flaherty. This is Mike Hamilton. I never know if I should say your name or you should say your name. It feels
Well,
awkward.
when you pause, I never know if I'm supposed to say my name or if I'm supposed to let you, or if that's like a dramatic pause for
We'll
effect.
figure that out at some
Yeah.
point. In pre-show prep that we always think to do right before the show.
We think we would have figured it out in the first 9 episodes.
You think, but imagine what the next 10 are going to be like. I mean, it's going to be quite a circus ride or something. All right, so this is kind of a cool topic because we were going to talk about something else this week, but Kenneth Lim, who we'll get back to, he and I got into a conversation over Twitter this week about World Cup, penalty kicks, statistical analysis, some of the predictive analysis that we had done last week when we talked about the Goldman Sachs World Cup,
right.
Predictive analytics, all of that stuff. And for those who aren't following the most watched sport in the world, this is the final week, and Sunday will be the final match, and it is the Germans versus Argentina, right? Yeah, I got that right. Okay, so what we actually wanted to talk about was the use of analytics in football, that's F-U-T-B-O-L, but also kind of wrapping up, we're going to do a little look at how it's kind of gone from the history of that, including starting with Ted Williams and the science of hitting way back in the 1950s. And so first article was actually something that Ken had sent along to us, and when you see it on your screen, you probably won't be able to read it. I couldn't, so I had to translate it from Dutch.
And even after Google, it's still pretty much unreadable.
Yeah, Google Translate, and that may be a whole other episode that we talk about overall. But really, what they were talking about is how do you win a penalty shootout? And there was some research done with that. What kind of stood out for you? I have a few things.
Well, the first is the whole green shirt thing.
Yes.
Which
was going to be my awesome segue to the next article.
Okay, well then we'll come back.
That.
Well, we'll come back to that.
Show prep would have been so helpful.
Yes.
Oh,
well, and if you're Orion, it would have been an orange shirt.
Right. Exactly.
Okay, so here's the couple of things.
Yep.
It was talking about sort of on the second page of the printout, which you guys at home don't have the printout. But it was talking about.
We should start backsplasting articles to all of our viewers so that they have this.
We should.
Do you think that would be easier than
Definitely.
doing this digitally?
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll do that.
We definitely want to kill some trees.
Keep going.
So one of the things it was talking about was the success rate based on the age range. And that the most successful, 85% were hit by the youngest group of players up to age 22.
Mm-hmm.
And then, it's still, so that's 85%, and then 23 to 28, 77%, 28 and above, 71%. And I was just sort of thinking, when I see these sorts of statistics, the first question I always start to ask myself is why?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what could be the possible explanation other than random chance? And I'm thinking on the younger kid piece, the younger players being more successful. I'm thinking from if you're a young kid and you are now playing on your national team,
Mm-hmm.
How did you get discovered in the first place? Probably because you're a really good kicker.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the soccer striker is, whatever the good terminology is. And so the younger kids are probably better at the actual kicking aspect because that's sort of like the duh in soccer, whereas the older players have been around. They've evolved their game on the defensive side and the strategic side, and they're still in the game not because they're the young kid that can kick the ball. They're in the game because they're smart. They lead the right passes. They
more strategic and
that's kind of I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I have no basis for that other than that's kind of what was my
I think,
first.
and it goes
my first
into an article we'll talk about in two stories, but I think it goes to confidence in a lot of aspects, and so I think. Confidence is definitely for the young, certainly in sports as well. And if you've never done it before, it seems like you can do it. And I think if you look at penalty kicks and the history of penalty kicks, specifically in the World Cup or UEFA Championship or any of the large championships, it is all about confidence. It's all about striking the ball the right way and understanding where it goes. If you hit the ball with confidence, you're going to have a better shot at actually getting it past the goalie overall.
Well, how much of that is just the young kids are young and stupid and they just don't know any better?
Right. And so you look at when Yedlin came in for the U.S., when we lost to Belgium, when he came in the middle of the first period because of injury. Here's this super young kid, played out of his gourd, and he was unbelievable. He may never play that well again, because then he'll know what it's like to not play that well.
Right.
And so it goes into this whole psychologically pushing of your competitive behavior and how you perform on the field, and can we actually measure that statistically? And we'll talk about that in a second. One of the things that I thought was interesting was they started looking at kind of the placement of the penalty overall and where it should be, and where high penalties are almost always stopped. And then if you go to the left and right and all that kind of stuff. And so they started looking at all of these things overall. And then ultimately, of course, they get to this whole idea of, and it kind of just ends the article, which is, now granted, we're reading this in broken English, but it's statistics show.
Broken is generous.
Right. Statistics show that a goalie's best, it should say best chance or whatnot, is to wear a green shirt. Right. And so that brings us to the next article. And if you look at the photo at the top of the article, there is Jasper. I am going to butcher names here. Silesen? Does that sound right?
Silesen? Sure.
Silesen. Being substituted for Tim Krul in the last minute of the Netherlands World Cup quarterfinal against Costa Rica. So if you had seen this, I had, and this Krul comes in. This guy's a foot taller than the other goalie. He's wider. When he's
longer
standing
arms.
at the goal, I mean, he was just kind of there. He just filled up this entire area. And so it was a strategic, it had nothing to do with green shirts. This was completely strategic by the coach of the Netherlands to bring this guy in to basically play for one thing and one thing only, and that was to stop penalty kicks. And he ends up winning penalty kicks 4-3 overall. And it spoke to this, throw the analysis out, potentially, or maybe not, because you look at the Costa Rican team, really young, so it goes back to the last statistic, probably confident, had just beaten the Greeks in penalty kicks in the round of 16. They easily could have done it again with just that youth mentality, and they looked like they were going to. Then all of a sudden this guy stands in front of you, completely changes the analysis overall. And so he became a defining moment in that. They weren't able to actually do it against Argentina in the last round, and they ended up losing penalty kicks, 4-2, I think. Right. Maybe 5-2, something like that. So,
and he was wearing a green shirt, so he was guaranteed to win.
He was wearing a green shirt, and they lost.
I would actually be interested to know, in that previous article when they're talking about the green shirt, what the global population of green shirt goalies. I'd be willing to bet the green shirt goalie actually, percentage-wise, mirrors the percentage of winning goalies with green jerseys.
Not following you. Say that again.
I'd be willing to bet that the number of goalies, of the percentage-wise, of all the data they were looking at, the number of green shirts was probably in the same neighborhood as the number of green shirts that won.
Yeah, probably.
Completely unrelated.
Sure.
Most likely.
And again, that's the faulty logic that we see throughout this, and it goes back. We've talked about this numerous times, just in analytics in general, certainly in predictive analytics, is this one thing can completely deter all of the other types of analysis that you're doing.
Right.
And to actually do analysis on that is extremely difficult. And that's actually something that the next article tried to do.
Very nice segue.
Really impressive, wasn't it?
Quite.
Wow. And you didn't even ruin it. That was really nice.
That's the first.
All right. So this is a paper done by the American Economic Review in December 2010. So it is, let me do the math. Almost 4 years old. This December will be 4 years old. Did I do that right?
You did that correct.
Yes, that's exciting.
You did that correctly.
You did that incorrect.
I did that incorrect.
All right. So I think this paper is complete bunk. It's long. That's cool. And they have a lot of data points and some really neat,
some cool charts,
algorithms. And they basically kind of in a nutshell talk about the fact that they can use analytics to really determine the psychological pressure in a competitive environment, specifically penalty kicks in championship games. And they can sit there and measure that and come up with some sort of ruling, and then they have policy recommendations that they have in here and all this kind of stuff. I don't know. I feel like this is completely utter just crap.
Fair enough. How do you really feel?
this stuff angers me because
So tell me what stuck out as the most like crap.
the crappiest,
Crappiest,
if you will. I think that it's this whole idea that they have this the pressure mounts on the team as they understand what the score is through the penalty kicks. So, for example, they talk about the fact that the team who kicks first usually wins in like the vast majority of time. I think it was like 96% or something. It was an absurd amount. I forget. Well, that means absolutely nothing because if it's just at some point that number that team that is defending on that point, it goes into sudden death eventually. And so a lot of these penalty kicks go beyond the 5.
Right.
And just because you kick first doesn't necessarily mean you're putting more pressure on that other team. It's all about the actual individual on that team. And this doesn't go into individuals or the fact that Tim Krul then is standing in front of me versus, Cleason. And then they talk about the fact that this whole idea of as it kind of goes on, the pressure that gets put on these athletes then affects their kicking ability and their ability to score. I'm not denying that, but I think that there's different players along that way, and that's why you put like those cold players third or fourth or whatnot. That's why Neymar always kicks fourth for the Brazilians, because the guy's just cold as ice. So it doesn't matter what the score is at that point. This is trying to do numbers, with human instincts and emotions across 240 players or whatever it was. That doesn't look at them as individuals.
So you're saying
it's a complete aggregation.
Right. So you're saying that it's missing context.
Yes, it's missing all the context. It's missing the human element and the behaviors of those people during that time. Where was it? There was something that came out. I'm going to switch sports. There was something that came out recently about curveballs and barometric pressure, and how you can correlate obviously the spin on the ball depending on the barometric pressure at the stadium at that time.
Right.
And that some managers are actually changing their pitching rotation based on barometric pressure depending on what it is at that point. Is that really that funny?
It's pretty.
Producer Kim, is that really that funny? Wow. So I think that takes into consideration a whole other element and of the person and the place and all that. This had nothing to do with that. There was nothing about location in this.
So there's a difference in what you're talking about and where they're taking statistics and information and then making decisions based on it rather than making sort of global, broad sweeping statements.
Right.
Now I do say I can't argue in my head that the pressure isn't changing dynamically. It talked about now they claim it has been shown that behavior often depends on the reference points, meaning the route those set of penalty kicks. If you're some kid in a penalty kick and you're kicking first, the pressure there is much different than if you're down 1 and you're taking the 9th of the 10th kicks, and you're your last chance to tie it to make sure
Yep.
You can't argue that is not a completely different pressure situation.
Of course, but then you put the right person in that if you're a good manager. Right. And some people who follow different teams would say that they don't do that well enough, right?
Yeah. So this is my own ignorance on Futbol. After the first five, is it then immediately sudden death? So it does.
Yes.
So like on the 11th kick, if the 11th kick goes in, team wins.
No, the home team, if you will, if we're using baseball analogies, the bottom, they have a chance to keep going.
Okay, so there is a
if
chance.
you score, I get a chance, but if I miss,
but there's not a predefined number of additional kicks.
No, you just keep going.
You have one more kick on each side.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I believe that's.
Well, so that's actually sort of makes. If you look at this one statistic that was actually interesting. Okay, the team that kicks first in their data set, wins 66% of the time.
Right.
But when it gets to the 6th round, it's 52.9%.
Right. Yep.
And so that, I think the difference in, or the effect of going first is, I think, closer to the 2.9%, the difference between 50-50, more so than it is the sort of the 65 or 70% chance that they say going first in the first 5 rounds.
Okay, so it diminishes, the impact of going first diminishes as you go into the rounds.
Yes.
Okay. So if I can get to the 5th round, and now what I don't know is I think you just then kick, the order continues.
Yes, the order does continue.
Yeah. So, all right. So so you kind of almost erase the impact of that by the time you come back around.
Right.
Right. So the other thing that was interesting here, and I think it just goes to athletes in general, but they interviewed. Oh, this is where the '96 came up. They interviewed hundreds of players and just said, would you rather kick first or defer? Because in 2003, FIFA started allowing you to defer. In 2009 or 8, the NFL started allowing that in overtime.
Right. No, regular kickoffs.
Oh, regular kickoffs. Okay. So, so you get the choice now. And so they asked players, and 96% said they prefer to kick first. And the reason was to put pressure on that first kicker for that other team.
Right.
Assuming that they're going to get it and score, right? And so I think that goes to the mentality of that. But my question would be, for you, if you're out there, you're the manager, you win the toss, it's the World Cup, you are managing your USA team, what do you do?
So I think this gets back to the context we were just talking about and understanding your team. If you've got Neymar, who you say is, ice, then I want him going last. I want to know every piece of information I possibly can.
Yep.
It's the same reason. If you go to you mentioned the NFL. So in 2008, they started allowing teams to defer the kickoff. So they didn't have to choose to kick or receive. They could choose to defer that decision to the second half. And the trend at this point is something like 80 or 90% of kickoffs are now deferred. The choice is deferred. And the reason from the coach's perspective is they want as much information as possible in the second half.
Right.
And also, But
it's opposite in overtime.
It's opposite in overtime.
You always want the ball first there.
Right.
Even with the new rules where you get the chance to score.
Right.
Right.
And so it's interesting
that's only 2 years
that on the American football side, it's coaches want more information and defer that further into the game when there's more information. Whereas in football, they're
I knew what you meant.
They're talking more about putting the pressure on the other team rather than having more information.
Yeah.
And one thing they didn't talk about was not enhancing the performance of their own goalkeeper. So it's not about even taking the pressure off of their goalkeeper, anything like that. It was purely focused offensively, whereas in American football, it's more of a defensive type approach. It was just interesting.
Well, and I think that Kroll substitution in the Costa Rican game is, the reason we're new to the sport overall, you even more than me, but it was such a big story that he was substituted at that point that this hadn't happened a lot.
Right.
So maybe this is a moment where people are going to start to consider,
right.
Maybe I just have a goalkeeper on my team that is just this enormous dude who can come in for PKs and do that. That's short for penalty kicks.
Right.
That's what fans say. PKs.
PKs.
Yeah. Or penalties. You just say penalties.
Yeah. The interesting thing
you say it in a British accent.
PKs. How was that?
Wow. We're not doing that.
We just have a new all-time low for take a look. One of the other interesting things that now I just lost my train of thought on because
they did.
So in kicking first, the one thing that never was brought up was what if you do go first?
Yes.
You kick first. Mm-hmm. What happens if you miss the first kick? How much additional pressure does that take that you've missed the first kick in the PKs?
Oh yeah.
Think about there was as I was going and looking on the NFL statistics, which for reference, 53%. The winning record for teams that defer is 53% of the time they win.
Is that overtime or?
No, this is for just kickoffs.
Wow.
Winning the game 53% if you defer. And I completely lost my train of thought again.
That's more than half.
That is more than half. Oh, but getting back to my the sort of the context. If you miss the first PK, you've now all of a sudden amplify the amount of pressure on your side. And in the case of when you defer and you're kicking to the other team, or you receive the ball and you fumble on that kick, which happens a fair amount of time, it's a massive momentum swing that then flips the momentum and the pressure back to you.
Which then goes into, and we're not even going to go there because we'll do our preseason football analysis one in September or maybe end of August. But I think that affects the way coaches coach in a lot of instances, especially in overtime. So, all right, final piece before we get to our person of the week. That's what I'm going to call it from now on. Person of the week. Remember I struggled with that last time? Yes. Doesn't have a good acronym though. POW.
POW?
POW. Person of week. Oh, the is not there.
POW.
POW. All right. We'll do that. The POW.
Now we have a new all-time low.
I like it. Not really. We're pretty up there right now.
Yeah, the bar is high on the all-time low.
It's pretty good. So this is a page from Ted Williams' Science of Hitting, and I kind of talk about this as maybe the world's first infographic. This was one of the first times that kind of analysis was done. Now, he did this, I think, mainly on his own with some help, but really where and you see this all the time now if you watch sports at all, you see these kind of hut zones of where he hit the best. And so basically he altered, and he called it his happy zone. He altered the way that he swung and the way that he waited for pitches until they were in his happy zone. And then he became the greatest all-time hitter to ever play the game. And there's no argument to that. That's a fact. Fact.
Did it look like I was arguing?
Fact. So, but I thought this was interesting because then I went to search for this for penalty kicks in the World Cup, and I couldn't find anything. And it's got to be out there. I mean, there has to be a similar kind of shooting chart.
Right.
And I looked and looked, and I couldn't find anything. But I always think that this is such a remarkable. This is 1940 something, and we now talk about this stuff all the time. But this was the first kind of instance of that.
Yeah, and I would be super interested to see sort of this similar diagram for hockey penalty shots, or you're watching an NBA game and you see Kevin Durant's the little diagram the shot chart, and the percentage zones
as it comes off his hands. And all, I mean, that's pretty remarkable because now they have cameras everywhere in the NBA arenas. But yeah, I would love to see it for this. You don't see this a lot too, either in football. You see it a little bit in terms of running back and lanes
and sometimes you see the passing 10 to 20 yards in those zones.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing on the football side is that's so much less valuable on the football side because the sample size is so much smaller. So think about in an NFL season, okay, maybe a quarterback throws. An average quarterback's throwing maybe 30 attempts a game.
Yep.
So you're looking at 400 sample, whereas on baseball they're seeing 20 pitches a game for 160 some odd games.
Yeah.
The sample size is much better.
You may not be able to see a trend in a quarterback until his fourth season.
Probably longer.
Yeah, and so you use other things overall. But I was thinking about this too, and we'll talk about it as we get closer to a big event we have coming up in the beginning of August. But this type of kind of plot of looking at different things and being able to immediately get insight into stuff is something that you can use and is being used and applied from baseball to Medicaid fraud to network security to all that stuff. And it's the fact that analytics, when done properly, should tell you an immediate story and do it visually. And this is what this does. I mean, I know exactly. And if I'm a pitcher, I know exactly where not to throw it to Ted Williams. And shame on me if I ever did. But in one season, almost half of the pitchers did because he hit 406, right? Still the highest batting average of any player. And that's why he's the best to ever play the game. No argument.
Wait, ever play the game or ever hitter?
Hitter.
You gotta watch.
All right.
Watch your.
The final thing that we'll talk about is POW. I love it. That sounds good. We'll get it like a graphic.
Remember the old Batman.
Yeah.
The old Batman graphics.
Kaboom! It'll be awesome. POW. Yeah, you remember those?
I do.
Yeah.
I was very young. I was much younger than you were.
I think you watched those on repeat on Nickelodeon.
I think I saw it for the first time last week on repeat.
With one of your children.
Yes.
There you go. So person of the week, I can't. I mean, how can we not give it to Kenneth Lim, who I've actually known Kenneth for a while now, at least on the social networks, and he is a really, really smart communicator, and he's actually a B2B marketer like ourselves, but a guy who actually really traverses the divide between kind of creative and visual storytelling and kind of the traditional marketing storytelling, which is something that we always try to do ourselves, and it's why we're doing this here. So I thank him for giving us an awesome topic and just being part of the community that we're trying to build here through Take a Look Live. And I think that's it.
And he gave us the topic for the week, and he also set the blueprint for how someone else might want to become the POW for next week.
So true. If you give us stuff, you will become the POW. I mean, that's what you're saying, right?
Pretty much.
Right. So what are some things that you would want?
Bolo tie.
Bolo tie. That is something that Mike is going to be wearing soon. Yeah, we still haven't made good on the bet.
I know.
The community is waiting.
I think I'm gonna have to set a deadline because you can't keep stringing me along with this this cloud hanging over my head.
I can. I won the bet. I can do whatever I want. I just haven't gotten my act together. I gotta get my act together. I know. We're a little busy. There's some stuff going on.
You were busy recording Take a Look Live.
Right, exactly. Thank you for everyone who's in our audience. We certainly miss Greg, and we're thinking about you out there. You're always a great audience member. So otherwise, that's it. We'll see you next week for episode
11.
Should we go backwards, though, because we don't have episode 6, because we lost it?
That would be weird.
Yeah?
It'll always be there in our.
Okay. All right.
It's gone, but not.
Producer Kim says no.
It's gone, but not
It
forgotten.
is 10. All right, so next week, episode 11. Thank you all.